We are back reading My Father's Dragon by Ruth Stiles Gannett, and we're on chapter 9. There's only 10 chapters in the book, so we're getting very, very close to the end. Remember our characters. Here's the dragon. We've gone through 8 chapters, and we still haven't met the dragon. Pretty soon, maybe. And here's our other main character, Elmer Elevator. Oh, he's got his hat always seems to fall over his eyes. And Elmer Elevator is also referred to as my father. He's got his knapsack on. It's been filled with lots of stuff to help him. So let's start reading. Chapter 9, My Father Makes a Bridge. My father walked back and forth along the bank, trying to think of some way to cross the river. He found a high flagpole with a rope going over to the other side. The rope went through a loop at the top of the pole and then down the pole and around a large crank. A sign on the crank said, "To summon dragon, yank the crank. Report disorderly conduct to the gorilla." From what the cat had told my father, he knew that the other end of the rope was tied around the dragon's neck, and he felt sorrier than ever for the poor dragon. If he were on this side, the gorilla would twist his wings until it hurt so much that he'd have to fly to the other side. If he were on the other side, the gorilla would crank the rope until the dragon would either choke to death or fly to this side. What a life for a baby dragon! My father knew if he had called to the dragon to come across the river, the gorilla would surely hear him. So he thought about climbing the pole and going across the rope. The pole was very high, and even if he could get to the top without being seen, he would have to go all the way across hand over hand. The river was very muddy, and all sorts of unfriendly things might live in it. But my father could think of no other way to get across. He was about to start up the pole when, despite all the noise the monkeys were making, he heard a loud splash behind him. He looked around in the water, but it was dusk now and he couldn't see anything there. "It's me, Crocodile," said a voice to the left. "The water's lovely and I have such a craving for something sweet. Won't you come in for a swim?" A pale moon came out from behind the clouds, and my father could see where the voice was coming from. The crocodile's head was just peeping out of the water. And here's our crocodile. Ooh, okay. And his head, can we put him so we can see him? Maybe not. Maybe I'll have to hold him. "Oh, thank you," said my father. "I never swim after sundown, but I do have something sweet to offer you." Do you remember what's in the backpack? Can you think of something we haven't used? Okay, let's read and find out. Perhaps you'd like a lollipop, and perhaps you have friends who would like lollipops too. Okay, so let's get out Elmer's backpack and see. Do you remember how many lollipops he had? I know he had lollipops. Well, we just used the magnifying glasses on the fleas. And here's the cranberry bag that he hid in. Oh, there's his clothes upside down. The very sharp knife. He hasn't used that yet. Rubber boots. He's used those a couple of times. Oh, and here we are. 24 pink lollipops. Do you know how many are in a dozen? Do you know how many are in 2 dozen? Ooh, I love math problems, and I think there's going to be another math problem. But let's leave that aside and just see, maybe he might need something else. The apples are all gone. Up the toothpaste and the toothbrush are back with, right, the rhinoceros. And there's the compass. Chewing gum. Who used the chewing gum? I think it was the tigers. He ate all of his peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. The lion used the ribbons and the comb and the brush. But here we have some rubber bands. Let's see if those get used. Lollipops, said the crocodile. Well, that's a treat. How about it, boys? A whole chorus of voices shouted, "Hooray, lollipops!" And my father counted as many as 17 crocodiles with their heads just peeping out of the water. Okay, if he has 24 lollipops and he uses 17, how many are left over? Can you do that math problem? That's fine, said my father as he got out the 24 pink lollipops and the rubber bands. Oops, I had them upside down. And the rubber bands. I'll stick one here in the bank. Lollipops last longer if you keep them out of the water, you know. Now, one of you can have this one. There's a very happy crocodile. The crocodile who had first spoken swam up and tasted it. "Delicious, delicious, mighty delicious," he said. "Now, if you don't mind," said my father, "I'll just walk on your back and fasten another lollipop to the tip of your tail with a rubber band, if you don't mind." "Can you get your tail out of the water just a bit?" asked my father. "Yes, of course," said the crocodile, and he lifted up his tail. Then my father ran along his back and fastened another lollipop with a rubber band. "Who's next?" said my father, and a second crocodile swam up and began sucking on that lollipop. "Now, gentlemen, you can save a lot of time if you just line up across the river," said my father, "and I'll be along to give you each a lollipop." So the crocodiles lined up. Right across the river with their tails in the air, waiting for my father to fasten on the rest of the lollipops. The tail of the 17th crocodile just reached the other bank. Pretty smart idea to get across the river. And that was the end of chapter 9. So tomorrow is the end, and I bet we finally get to meet the dragon. Thanks for listening with me.